Greetings, my friends, and welcome to another episode of The World According to Waz. It is now Wednesday, April 19th, 2023, Wednesday evening, and I hope you're all having a good week so far. There's an awful lot that's been going on in the news lately, and there's so many stories. It would take me hours to just go through them all, but we're going to go through some of them. And you're going to see that a lot of these stories have something in common. They're all stories about the wacky woke left and the different things that they do in their day-to-day lives that we, who are not part of the wacky left, are diametrically opposed to. We're going to start off with a rather insane story. This is from Fox News. And it says, Washington State Middle School blasted for highly vile licking game between staff and students. It's some sort of licking game. In a video recorded by appalled students at Desert Hills Middle School in Kennewick, minor students and adult teachers are shown licking marshmallow cream off of either side of two clear plexiglass panes at the same time during a competition at a school pep rally on March 31st. Students in the crowd could be heard screaming, "Ew," and "disgusting, that's so gross," and "what the heck?" In a video, which was later posted to Facebook by a concerned mother, another student yelled, "Who thought that this was a good idea?" The story goes on. Megan Saw, the mother whose daughter sent her the video, told Fox News Digital that she originally emailed the superintendent, the school board, and the Human Resources Department asking for an explanation regarding what happened to see how they would be addressing the situation. In the video, the principal is seen laughing while taking out his phone to film the scene, according to Saw. She also said that she was baffled by another part of the video that showed a grown adult holding a child's head to the plexiglass while licking the other side of the structure, although she said she was mostly alarmed by the final scene where a security guard looked like he was licking the marshmallow off the plexiglass in a sensual way. Now, this is another one of those stories where you just have to ask, what the hell's wrong with you people? You know, this is a middle school, so which is generally like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, right? Ages, 12, 13, 14. And these are adults doing this with children in a school. And this is another example of grooming. Now, this time it may not involve transsexuals or homosexuals in any way. They could be straight heterosexual people. But excuse me, it's the same type of thing. It's grooming. You're doing sexually suggestive things with kids in the school. And again, you have to ask, what the hell's going on? What the hell's wrong with you people? If I was one of the parents in this school, I would be going up there and demanding these people's heads on a spike. You know, but it's just so ridiculous that these days, if you object to any of this stuff, say at school board meetings and that, you're labeled a domestic terrorist by your own federal government. The whole thing is just insane. And, you know, that reminds me of something on my next podcast I'm going to probably do tomorrow. I'm going to talk about what are we going to do about half of the country who we don't agree with on virtually anything anymore. But I'll leave that for the next podcast. We're going to move on to the next story now. Another story out of Washington State. And you'll notice that pretty much all these crazy stories seem to come from just a few places in the country. Generally, they come out of places like California, sometimes New York, Washington State, Oregon. You know, these woke havens that are completely run by lefties. And this is pretty much where all this nonsense comes from. And this next story, again from Washington State, the headline is, Washington State passes a bill to hide the whereabouts of runaway children seeking sex changes. It says a Washington bill that would give the state government the power to hide the whereabouts of seeking sex changes from their non-affirming parents has passed the House and Senate. SB 5599, supporting youth and young adults seeking protective health care services, is intended to, quote, give meaningful choices to young people who may not have supportive families at home, so they do not end up on the street, but instead have shelter options when seeking this life-saving care. You notice they always say this, life-saving, affirming care. You know, I've got a question about that. Whose life is being saved? Which one of these children, if they don't have this surgery where, you know, you give them puberty blockers and maybe you chop off their penis or remove their breasts, How is that going to save their life? Unless, of course, they have, say, breast cancer or something like that, which unfortunately happens. Obviously with older women, but women who are adults, I very rarely see children or teenagers develop, say, breast cancer and that. I assume it's possible, but it's probably a 1 in a million type of thing. So you have to ask, I mean, whose life is being saved here? How many 8-year-olds are going to die if they don't have their penis removed? Or have their breasts removed? Or even 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds? Virtually none. So, this is the way they frame these things this way. They're called what they're called to elicit a certain response, to make it sound good, make it sound appealing. Just like the Patriot Act. I mean, you're not for the Patriot Act? What are you? You some sort of commie? You hate America? How can you not be for the Patriot Act? Or the Affordable Care Act, for example, another one. Who can be against affordable health care? But of course, neither of these bills really have anything to do with the title in the name. The title is misleading. And that goes with this, life-saving, gender-affirming care. But anyway, getting back to the story goes on. If it becomes law, SB 5599 would disenfranchise loving parents who deserve to have a say in the care of their teenage children, said State Republican leader John Brown in a press release. Children between the ages of 13 and 18 can already access these same health and mental health services under Washington state law, without their parents' permission. The only thing this new bill would do is cause harm by driving a wedge between vulnerable kids and their parents, at a time when he lacks the perception and judgment to make critical, life-altering decisions. Now, let's listen to what he just said about that. These people, according to this gentleman, this representative in Washington State, these teens lacked the perception and judgment to make critical, life-altering decisions. Well, if that's the case, then why the hell is it even legal in the first place? I mean, obviously that's why you don't let your 13-year-old make decisions like this. He or she isn't old enough and mature enough to understand what the hell's going on. But in Washington, they really don't care. It's not about what's right and what's wrong, or whether or not these children are mature enough and intelligent enough to understand what's going on. It's all about pushing an agenda. And getting back to the story, it says, under current law, licensed shelters must notify parents if a child comes into their care, unless there is a compelling reason to keep the child's whereabouts a secret. SB 5599 allows shelters to contact the Department of Children, Youth, and Families instead of the parents, should the child be seeking an experimental sex change or reproductive services. So the bill allows government to bypass the parents altogether if the kid wants to have a sex change or have an abortion. You're 13, you want to have a sex change or abortion? Fine, we'll take care of it for you. We won't let your parents even know what's going on, and they'll find out after the fact. Back to the story. It says, we know that young people experiencing homelessness are exposed to dangerous and harmful outcomes. That is why we must take every step we can to ensure their safety, the bill sponsor, Sen. Marco Lilas, said in a statement. This legislation ensures that our trans youth have safe options and access to secure, stable shelter when they may not be welcome at home. However, there is mounting evidence that young people who are allowed to undergo experimental sex change procedures while still in a crucial stage of identity development are also being exposed to dangerous and harmful outcomes. Well, no shit. That's why the whole thing is just a damn mess. The whole thing is a disaster. You've got kids who aren't old enough to understand what's going on, making these kind of decisions. And again, as I've said many times before, and I'm sure many of you agree, virtually no child, especially young, kids, ages 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 years old, are going to even think of anything like this on their own without the encouragement and support of some adults that have, some kind of a motive behind what they're doing, some kind of evil intention. I mean, your average 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old is not going to come up to you and say, I want a sex change. If that happens, most likely there's an adult behind the scene steering this child in that direction. And by getting back to the story, and talking about how these procedures can be unsafe. Well, no kidding, they can be unsafe. Anytime you go under the knife, there's a possibility of something going wrong. Whether the surgery is minor or major, it doesn't matter. They're putting you under. You're going under the knife. They're cutting into your body somewhere and doing something. Something can go wrong. That doesn't mean it will. 99.999% of the time, everything probably works out okay. But there's always that possibility when you cut into somebody. And you're doing this unnecessarily. Again, you're removing body parts from kids, from children who don't know any better. Body parts that, you usually use and need as you get older and become adults. You're removing them, having them removed. And then later in life, many of these people, well, again, we don't have, much data on that because this hasn't been going on that long. This whole transgender movement and chopping off body parts and stuff like that. It's not like we have 40 years worth of data to go over and see what the long-term effects are on this. I mean, there may have been people who've done this in the past, say in the 1990s or whatever, 1980s, but that was a handful of people. Nothing like we've had in the past 5 years or so. The whole thing is just taken off like mad. And, it's just insane. And again, it's happening to children who really don't know what's going on. They're being, coaxed into doing this by certain adults they're on some sort of mission. And it raises a lot of questions. I mean, first and foremost, we all know that kids can't make certain decisions in life. That's why their parents are responsible for them, to steer them in the right direction in that until they get old enough to where they can make these decisions on their own. So a kid can't go to school and, say, take an aspirin or an allergy pill without some sort of written consent from the parents and maybe even doctors, physicians, whatnot beforehand. A kid can't buy a six-pack of beer or a pack of cigarettes in a store. But that same child can turn around and say, I'm a girl, when they're really a boy, or vice versa, and have their body parts removed, and the government is more than fine with it. In fact, it'll pay for it, in many cases, with taxpayer funding. It's heading in that direction, where this is going to be part of socialized medicine. All of this will be covered. And these are decisions that are being made by people who are not mature enough to make such decisions. And it's going to affect their lives greatly. I mean, if suddenly your reproductive organs are shot, they're gone, what do you do when you realize you're 20 years old and you look back and you're like, what the hell did I do to myself? Well, it's too late then. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. You had your penis removed, you had your breast removed, you had your vagina or ovaries or whatever done, whatever they do down there with that stuff. I don't even want to think about it. They're doing this with children. It's not adults making these decisions. If an adult wants to do this to himself, hey, go for it. It's up to you. It's your body, whatever you want to do. That doesn't mean I agree with it. I think it's a good idea. I may think you're a moron for doing it, but at least you're an adult. If you want to do whatever you want to your body, as far as I'm concerned, go for it. But these are children we're talking about. That's why everybody is up in arms. That's why everybody's up in arms about these drag shows. Family-friendly drag shows. It's not so much that they're drag shows. I mean, if this were confined to just adults, most people would be like, yeah, whatever, I mean, just a consenting adults, they want to go do this stuff and watch this stuff in a nightclub or whatever. Knock yourselves out, But they're involving children. And they're involving children on purpose. It's for a reason. They want to groom kids. There's no other way to put it. If you insist on being able to do this in front of kids, what other reason do you have for wanting to do this other than grooming kids? Because your average 5-year-old, 10-year-old is not interested in any of this stuff. They could care less. They don't even know what the hell a drag queen is. Well, they do now because the drag queens are in your face, front and center, insisting that you pay attention to them. But most kids, or even most adults, could care less. I think that's part of the reason why they're so much in your face. It's beyond the point of adults being allowed to do what they want to do with their own body and their own lives in regards to sex and that. It's not just they want to be allowed to do it and say be transsexual or homosexual or bisexual or use any of a number of pronouns or whatever in their titles. Most people could care less. If you're an adult, you want to do this, go for it. It's gotten past that point. It's gotten to the point now where they want you to affirm and approve of publicly the decisions they're making in regards to their sex lives and that. And celebrate it. Celebrate it along with them that they are gay or they are transsexual or whatever the hell it is. That's where we are now. It's not merely, being allowed to do something. For example, gays back in the day, the whole fight was about being able to marry. Okay, well, we got gay marriage now. And gays being able to shack up with, men with men, women with women, whatever. Okay, well, that's fine. That's where we're at in this society. That's tolerated. It's legal. But it's way past that. It's to the point to where you've got to celebrate people's hedonism. Celebrate their sexual acts that they perform with each other and allow them to do this in front of kids. Strutting around. Guys pretending to be women strutting around in front of little kids in sexually provocative ways. For what other reason would you do this other than try to groom these kids? Why would you insist on doing this in front of children, if not for that reason? That's an honest question. And the answer is they want to groom your kids. They want your kids. It's the truth. We know this. We've known this all along. And that is why we're opposed to kids being involved in this stuff. Whether it be at schools, whether it be at family-friendly drag shows. Enough is enough. We have to say, no, no, no. We're not allowing this. Stop. No more. We're not going to tolerate it any longer. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up for tonight, my friends. Again, this is Wednesday night, April 19th. The day after Tax Day. Tax Day this year, of course, was April 18th on a Tuesday. I assume that was done because April 15th fell on a weekend. The day where you figure out how much of your income the government has stolen from you. You just shake your head and say, man, if I had at least half of that money, I would be doing so much better. But the government just takes more and more and more all the time between state governments and federal government, their taxation, all these fees, licensing fees and that. Any sort of fee of any kind is a tax. If you think about it, they're all taxes in one form or another. Whether it's renewing your tabs on your license plates for your car, that's another form of taxation. That money goes to the government. I mean, all this stuff. You have to get a permit so you can build a deck in your backyard. Why do you need a damn permit to build a deck in your own backyard? Well, it's because they want to make more money off of you. It's not because of the safety and all this other stuff they say. That has nothing to do with it. They just want the money. It's your property. You should be able to do the hell you want with it. But even that's another story. Do we really own our own land, our own property? Because every single year, without fail, you must pay property taxes on it. You've already purchased the land. You could have been purchased it 40 years ago. You paid for it, and you paid sales tax on it when you bought it. But every year since then, you're taxed on it over and over and over again. The exact same item, which is your land that you already own, you're paying taxes on. And 40 years after you bought this piece of property, if you stop paying taxes on it, Even though you've paid taxes on it when you bought it, you paid sales tax on it when you bought it, then you paid tax on it each and every year to the government. They steal more and more and more tax money off the same piece of property that you bought back in 1980 or whenever. If you suddenly stop paying your yearly taxes on it, the government will seize that land. Ultimately, they will seize your land. They will fine you, and if you refuse to pay, they will claim your land. The land that you legally purchased, that you already paid sales tax on, and paid yearly property taxes on forever, they will steal that property from you because you refuse to be fleeced year after year after year, paying the tax on the exact same piece of property you bought back in 1982 or whenever it was. So we really don't own our own land, then, do we? At the end of the day, the government owns everything. Because if you stop paying taxes on this stuff, even though you pay taxes on it, like I said many times, they will, at the end of the day, steal that land from you. But hey, that's enough topic for another day. We're going long here. So you all have a good evening, and I'll talk to you again soon.